The following are stories taken from the subreddit Let's Not Meet. As far as I know, they're all true. Story 1. For the sake of the story, I don't recall every word of my conversations. It was 15 years ago. So I'll try to do my best to recreate them to make the story flow, based on what I do remember. I was about 19 when I was offered a job by my cousin to work for our uncle's glass business. They install giant glass windows in tall buildings and skyscrapers. Not that it's too relevant to the story. The catch to the job was I had to temporarily move to Destin, Florida, from Tampa. My cousin lived up in Russellville, Alabama, and I wanted to go visit the family there and leave with them to go back down to Destin. This was my first long-distance road trip, and my first trip away from my immediate family. Back then I was driving a puke green Mercury Sable, a car barely capable of getting groceries back home. But in my invincible youth, I didn't care about that. I was just so pumped to be spreading my wings and getting out into the world that the risks didn't concern me. My mum and dad tried to get me to plan and pack better, knowing the trip could have its pitfalls. But it wasn't like the trip was going to take days and fast food exists, so I wasn't stressing about it. I mean, I'm not stupid. I packed for the trip and staying for a few months in Destin, but they wanted me to bring food, water, emergency supplies, etc. I declined because it wasn't the 1930s, and of course there are gas stations at every exit, and I had a Razor flip phone. My thinking was, what could possibly happen on two busy interstates? It wasn't like I was going to some far-off country with no cell service. Anyway, fast forward to the trip. I'm a Florida boy. I had no idea Alabama could get so cold. And I had no idea the heating in my car was broken. I had never used it. At first I'm thankful because by the time I reach Alabama, I'm tired as hell, and I had to make a lot more stops than I anticipated. I still had a few hours to go, and the cold air was keeping me awake. Finally, I pull off the interstate and start heading through these smaller numbered roads. The roads didn't have conventional lanes like in Florida, but they were just numbered, which I found odd. After driving on those for a bit, I started being sent down gravel roads. This was in the days of MapQuest, so I didn't have a GPS guiding me through the paved roads or rerouting me around the roadblocks. I was starting to get hungry and thought back to my parents telling me to pack food. I should have listened. The sketchiest thing with MapQuest was that you just printed out the directions. You didn't have a map to fall back on. So going out of your way to find fast food at an exit came with the potential of legitimately getting lost. I had passed a few signs telling me to turn off for food because I was tired and didn't want to chance it. Instead, I was looking for something off the side of the road that I could easily pull in and pull back out of with no fuss, and more importantly, no risk of getting lost. My prayers were answered a little down the road when I saw a beat-up old country grocery store on my right-hand side. It didn't even have a name. It just said, grocery, across the front of the white building. I pulled in because the light shining across the grocery sign was on, but found it odd that most of the lights inside were off. This gave me the creeps a little, but didn't stop me from going up to the door. I was starving, and maybe this was a 24-hour place. I saw a shadow move across the back of the long aisles as I approached the glass door, and surprisingly, opened it with ease. At this point I half expected them to be closed, due to the lack of lighting inside, and hoped an owner would take pity on a tired traveller and let me grab some snacks. I called out, "Hello?" No one answered. Then I said something along the lines of, "I saw you when I pulled up and I was hoping you're still open." Again, no answer. Now this was really naive of me, but I assumed maybe the owner was older and couldn't hear me. There was a constant buzzing sound coming from the back. Or maybe he was deaf. So I went further back into the store. It honestly didn't smell great inside, and I hoped they had at least some chips or something. At least those are sealed. Suddenly a man emerged from the back. "I'm so sorry. We were just about to close. How can I help you?" he asked with a smile. He nearly made me jump out of my skin at first, but he seemed friendly enough. Not the old man I was picturing, Actually, a younger guy, maybe in his 30s. Yeah, I just came up from Florida. It's been a long drive. I was hoping you guys had something to eat for the trip. We have plenty. What are you looking for exactly? He said without taking his eyes off me. The guy had a weird, unblinking stare that put me on edge. But what made me the most uncomfortable was his smile. He smiled big, but his eyes never moved. As in, the only way you could tell he was conveying an emotion was by looking at his mouth. The rest of his face stayed the same. Most people you could tell they're smiling, even if their mouth was covered, because you smile with your whole face. Not this guy. Just some chips or maybe a Coke. Do you have Doritos? Of course, he said, walking past me. He locked the door behind me before turning and smiling. Don't want anyone else walking in? He chuckled. Him locking the door was creepy, but I shrugged it off because the reasoning was sound, even though it felt off. Follow me, the guy said, as he walked towards the back of the store. I was young, but I should have been smart enough to know the store owners generally don't give their customers a tour of the store. But I had lived a pretty sheltered life. I could feel that something was off, but I didn't want to offend by asking questions like, "What's that smell?" We get to the back of the store, to where those plastic flaps hang that separate the customer side and the back end, when the man sticks his hand through, parting the plastic, and says, "Right this way." Now alarm bells are starting to go off in my head, especially as he starts looking around and past me, like someone who is selling drugs and watching out for the police. "Back there?" I ask and start to back up a little. That's when I notice the chips beside me on the aisle. The guy noticed me seeing the chips and says, "Yeah, back here. We got our good stuff in the back. You can come and take your pick." By this time, I find the source of the buzzing. Flies are flying over the meat section and the dim light reflecting off the packaging lets me know it's been sitting there a while. "I'll just take this if that's all right," I say nervously, as I grab a bag off the shelf next to me and start backing up towards the door. "Trust me, those are no good. I have way better stuff in the back here," he smiles, gesturing me to head back. I fake patting my pockets and say, "Oh man, I forgot my wallet in my car. I'll be right back." As soon as the word left my lips, I was spun around and did a light jog to the front, increasing with speed as I approached the door. I make it to the door and twist the lock a couple of times until I hear the click. I push the door open and turn back to look at where the man is. But he's gone. I jumped into my car and sped out of the parking lot and didn't stop again until I reached my cousin's house. Story 2. Hi everyone. I will try to keep this as concise as possible while still delving into necessary detail. I joined Reddit just yesterday to tell this story because I am looking for answers to these terrifying events that have altered my daily routine tremendously, as I'm currently living in fear. This happened in a span of 2 days, 5 days ago. I'm not sure if these events are connected. However, I'm convinced they are. I'm an 18-year-old male, 6'1", 190 pounds. I live in Seattle, and I work at a local grocery store as my father insisted on me getting a job amidst the lockdown, and grocery stores are a few places hiring nowadays. Anyways, I work at 5 a.m. and wake up around 4 a.m. I don't mind it because I get off early. It's still dark when I arrive at the store, and I always have to call the store and ask the produce workers to let me in. As I was walking up to the door, I see an average-looking man, probably in his late 30s. He doesn't work at my store, and clearly he was tweaking out, moving around in crazy motions, on meth or something. It was common to find needles in the bathroom of the store. As I was waiting for the door to be opened, he was facing me about 8 feet away, not looking at me, but past me. He was chanting some weird satanic shit, something like, "Satan will come, Satan knows." He kept repeating those lines. I was just standing at the door like, what the f*** is this dude on? Someone just let me inside already. Nothing else strange happens at work that day, and I get off at 9 a.m., as I only worked a 4-hour shift that day. As I'm driving home, I get a call and the ID said it was from a nearby city. I answer and I literally just hear a guy breathing. I'm just sitting there thinking this is some corny prank. Since the audio was playing through the speakers in my car, his breathing was amplified, so I'm not sure if it was intentional. I read one time that if someone keeps you on the phone for long enough, they can get your IP address. I'm not certain of this though. He then says my full name in the tone of a question, but also in a weird, strangely excited kind of way that made me feel extremely uneasy. This was very stupid of me to confirm who it was, but I said, "Yeah, who is this?" And then he just pauses and hangs up. I realized a few hours later that he sounded exactly alike to the satanic dude from the morning, except sober. I get paranoid fairly easy, but this was a red flag and sent chills down my spine. I tried to call back, and the number was, you guessed it, disconnected. The next day I arrive at work with no troubles, and leave at 9 a.m. I get home about 9:20. I see my father's car in the driveway as he is usually home at this time. The front door to my house was unlocked. I shouldn't think anything of this because my dad was home. Right? I walk in, take off my shoes, and call out for my dad because I brought in his mail. So before I explain this next part, you need to understand that many noises people hear are misidentified as something they are truly not. Or their mind is playing games with them. Or it's just the house making noises, etc. But there is a very specific noise that my parents' bed frame makes because it's wood, when someone is rolling around on it. I know this sound very well because my room is right next to my parents', and my dad is an extremely light sleeper. And any time I drop something or make a relatively loud sound, I can hear him rolling around in his bed because I disturbed him. Okay, continuing on. I call out for my dad as I'm walking up the stairs, and there is no response. Only that noise of the bed frame moving. I later that day rolled around on the bed to confirm the noise I heard, and that you need a significant amount of weight on the bed in order to produce that sound. This was when I got scared as hell, because my dad wakes up very early, and there is no way he was taking a nap at 9:30 a.m. I'm already at the top of the stairs at this point, so I burst into my room and closed the door. I listened through our paper-thin walls and I genuinely heard someone whispering, and then the springs releasing as if someone was sitting on the edge of the bed and stood up. If he was whispering, that means there could potentially be 2 people in my house, and I could be in real danger. I instinctually grabbed my dresser and dragged it in front of my door. That thing weighs probably at least 150 pounds, and it took me a little while to drag it in front of my door. My heart was pounding. I was worried the intruder or intruders would catch on to what I was doing and break through my door before I had the chance to do it. I just slammed the dresser down in front of my door not to waste any more time. Nobody was getting through that door. I felt slightly more relaxed and called my dad. I started to get nervous because he didn't answer, but he sometimes went on walks around the neighborhood at this time. Just as I tried to call him, I saw him walking up the street out from my bedroom window and shouted that it wasn't safe for him to come into the house. At first he laughed it off and proceeded up the driveway, as nothing like this has ever happened, and we live in a somewhat safe area. I repeated myself, but this time I screamed at him. Now he knew I was serious. He could see the fear in my eyes. He stepped back a few feet and asked what the hell was going on, and I felt like I really didn't have time to explain and just told him to wait. Once I confirmed my father was safe, I called 911, and the intruder or intruders next to me must have heard it, because once I got off the phone, they ran down the stairs. I was scared for my dad at this point, because he was just right outside. I had to move the dresser again from my door, as I was in a panic state, and I left my room and ran down the stairs to see nothing except my dad, who was still confused and pointed out that the back door was wide open. The cops got there about 12 minutes later and came up with nothing. No evidence of forcible entry, literally nothing, besides the wide open back door and some mud tracked in the house, which really pissed me off. Could the man whispering been the man who was talking to Satan the other day? How did that man know my name on the phone? Can someone track you if they know your phone number and full name? Were these people trying to abduct me? This only happened 5 days ago, and I've been scared ever since, worrying they might come back. I also have sleep paralysis, and it has gotten worse lately. And if you've had it before, yeah, it sucks. That's my story. I hope nothing like this happens to any of you. Thanks for listening. And to the satanic worshipper, let's never meet again. Story 3. I'm new to Reddit, and I've been binge reading all the posts here from the past year. That made me remember some weird things that happened to me and my mum. Sorry about the English, it's not my native language. So, a little context to help the story flow. My parents got divorced when I was 10 years old, and my brother was 8. They bought a house in a fairly big land and decided to split it. The house was demolished, and my mum was building a new house to live with me and my brother. We lived in a very small city that is known for its safety. Fast forward to when I was 15. Now I'm 25, and the house still wasn't ready. Me, my brother, and my mum lived in an apartment really close to where they were building the house, so we would check it from time to time. It was an evening when me and my mum were getting back from the market and decided to go and check on the house. As we were parking in front of the house, the car light shows a man trying to jump the fences to get in. I was really freaked out, but my mum stepped out of the car and shouted to the man, "What the hell are you trying to do?" It was an old guy, maybe in his late 60s. He was really tall, white, and skinny. He was starting to get bald, having hair just on the sides of his head. He just sent out really creepy vibes. He jumped out of the fence and looked kind of scared. He wasn't expecting someone to show up because nobody lived in that place. He said he lived in an apartment building next to the house, and he was trying to cut down a branch from a tree that was knocking on his window. So my mum said he was trespassing, and if he wanted to do something in her house, he should have contacted her. She yelled at him to go away and never come back. We went home and never really talked about it. A few months later, my family finally moved into that house. It's a cute house with lots of trees and a space for my dogs to run free. At that time, we had 3 dogs, 2 small ones, and a border collie we rescued. Every day we could hear a teenage female voice yelling at the apartment building next to our house. We figured it was just some teenage drama, because we could hear her saying things every teen says to their parents, like, "I don't want to live here," or "You don't get me at all." So we never really did anything about it. Some time has passed, and my best friend moved into an apartment in that building. She said she could hear that teen yelling to her father. Guess who the father was? Yes, the man that was trying to get inside my yard. That freaked me out a little bit, but I didn't have any proof he was doing anything to her. One evening, I was eating some fruits in the front of my house with my dogs, and I heard some screams, like a man and a woman were fighting. I looked around and figured out it was coming from the building next to my house. As I looked at the building, I saw a woman falling from a balcony, but I couldn't see if anyone had pushed her. I called an ambulance. They were really fast getting there and took her to the hospital. At the same time, the police came and took a man that I couldn't get a good look to see if it was the same man that trespassed here. I didn't get to know what happened that day, or who the man was. My dad started building his house next to my mum's. I spent a lot of time in my best friend's apartment that was next door to the creepy guy. As I said, my yard was filled with trees, and sometimes we would see animals there, like lizards, snakes, foxes, and possums. One day, me and my friend were on her balcony and can see a lizard walking in the wall that separated my house and the building. On the balcony next to hers, the creepy man showed up with a gun trying to shoot the lizard. We started screaming at him, begging him not to kill it. He looked at us surprised. I guess he just thought he was alone. He said nothing and just went back into his apartment. I told my dad about it, and he just said I shouldn't interact with that man. I was already 18, and things started to calm down. Or so I thought. It was an afternoon around 4 o'clock, and I was home alone. I decided to go for a walk with my border collie dog. She's really sweet, and I used to ride my bike as she followed me running. So, we did that. As we were coming back to my house, just passing by the building, that man throws a really big rock at my dog. She was running, so the rock hit her leg. I cursed him and got back in my house, looking at my dog to see if she was hurt. I told my mum, and she said I should never go out walking alone. Some days later, I found a really cute but skinny cat at my college. I was sitting down smoking when this cat jumped in my lap. I came back to watch a class with him. He slept in my lap the whole class. I brought him back home. He was orange and fierce. As he was a street cat before, we let him go for walks in my street. Everyone liked him. He was really friendly and asked everyone to pet him. People would let him in their houses and frequently sent pictures to my mum of the cat in their yards or on their sofas. So we never really thought he was bothering someone by walking around. At this time, we were forgetting about the violent nature from our neighbour. My family went on a trip to visit my grandma, and my dad stayed to take care of our pets. He said that one night he heard some footsteps around the house, but as he walked out the front door, he couldn't see anyone. He thought it was just the dogs messing around, and went back to the house to sleep. When we came back, we realised one of the trees in my mum's house was dying. It was a really big tree. We think it's 100 years old. This tree is the biggest one in the yard, and it was always so beautiful. I should also mention this is the tree that the man was complaining about the first time we met him. So my dad went to look at that tree and found a lot of holes in it. He said putting holes in a tree is a way to get poison inside to kill it. He also said we shouldn't tell my mum because it was going to scare her and make her feel really sad, because the trees were the main reason to buy that place. I never told her about it. Some time passes and me and my brother moved out to another town to finish our studies. I wanted to take my cat with me, but my mum said it was going to be hard for him to adapt to living in an apartment. He liked it so much to walk around, so I agreed he should stay with her. A few days later, she visited me and said my cat had died. I was broken. How did it happen? She found him with his neck broken in front of the apartment building next to our house. His head had been twisted, but he was still alive. But as my mum arrived at the vet, my cat was already dead. She thinks it was that man that killed him. We don't have any proof, but you know that feeling when you just know it. I cried so much, and just writing about it makes me cry. He was my first cat, and he was just so sweet. My mum still lives in the same house. She has 5 cats now, but none of them go out. That man still lives next to her. I'm with her during quarantine, and I see him all the time. He walks past our house, always looking up to see if someone's in there. I wish I could just say, "Hey, creepy old guy, let's not meet." But unfortunately, I see him almost every day. I didn't expect this post to get so much attention. And thanks for everyone who took time to read and comment, and thanks for the advice. About the girl falling from the balcony. She lived. She came back in a wheelchair. I don't know if that's a permanent thing or not. And she took her things and went away. I don't know who pushed her, but my best friend that lived in the same building said the man was still living there. A few months after this, a lot of creepy things started to happen in our neighbourhood, but that's for another post. About turning him into the police. When he threw a rock at my dog, I did report him to the police, but nothing happened. I didn't contact the authorities about the other stuff, because I don't have any proof. We did install cameras and hired a security system. That was 5 years ago, and nothing weird ever happened again. That guy still walks by our house trying to look inside and talking to himself. But that's it. Story 4. It all happened back in the 90s. I would say 96 or 97. I was something around 14 years old. I had this close friend, Carl. Carl was like a big brother to me, sometimes playful, sometimes a bully. As most of the boys who grew up in the 90s, we spent all of our free time playing video games, watching cheesy horror flicks, and roaming the neighbourhood on our bike-cross bikes, all stickered up like motorcycles. Once in a while, my mother would take us to my gran's. They lived in the countryside just outside our town. After having our meal, we'd usually gear up, grab some snacks and juices, and jump on our bikes and go to the lake. To do so, we had to ride till the end of a bumpy road and then go through a sunflowers field. The lake was downhill from there. Now, every time we'd cross that field, a building in the far would intrigue us. It seemed abandoned. It was a typical factory building from the 80s. We could see a lot of windows were jammed. Some parts of the roof had holes and the sun was beaming from it. I swear we came across this place 30 times at least. Sometimes we'd come closer and play dare. I always ended up being the chicken as Carl was really willing to check in there. One day, though, I dared. We parked the bikes against the wooden fence, and then we started the trespassing. Outside the building, dozens of rusty cars, engines out, some seats put on the floor, some others burnt or mauled. The entrance was poorly barricaded, but enough to make us climb up a pipe to the first window we saw. The inside was shocking. It looked like people stopped everything they were doing and rushed out. Tools were disposed on workshops. A car was hanging up by a huge chain and it was still slightly moving. The only thing that yelled abandoned was the tremendous amount of dirt and dust. I remember Carl found an iron pole and started swinging it like he was a video game character or something. I knew him. Even if he played it cool, I felt he was scared and tried to act tough. We headed to what seemed to be the administrative aisle. It was upstairs. We had to take some thin iron stairs threatening to detach from the staircase on every breath. The gloom intensified. This place was basically a long hallway with offices all along. Again, it could have been functional the week before, because everything except the dust and the stuffy smell, everything was left untouched. In a room, we found a newspaper from 1984 or 1985. It made us compute that they bailed out this year. What impressed me the most was the family pictures in frames we found in some offices. That was creepy. Who would leave work forever without taking pictures of their kids? At this time, a picture meant something. Smartphones didn't exist, so if you lost it, it was done. When we took back the stairs, Carl saw a small wooden door under the staircase. It led to a basement. That place looked inhabited. The floor was covered with trash, feces, and it smelt like urine. In a corner, we found an actively decaying corpse of a cat. A green curtain was hanging and masked what we were about to see. Behind the curtains, we stared in awe in front of a man lying on the floor. He was jabbering words we didn't understand and didn't directly look at us. Another man was facing a wall. Although it was clear we were there, I even stumbled on an empty can. He was still facing that wall. Till this day, I don't know what he was doing. Now it was clear that the guy who was lying down was drooling and had his eyes injected red. We ran out of there. I recall jumping on my bike and seeing a silhouette behind a window on the first floor. We never told this story to our parents. We were too afraid of being grounded. Last year I chatted with Carl on social media. We didn't see each other for 15 years. I asked him if he remembered that day. He told me, "Of course I remember. I was shitting my pants, dude. I didn't want to go there at all. And I never thought you would say dare." Thank you for watching and/or listening to this video. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and show your appreciation by tapping on the like button. And if you're new to my channel and enjoy listening to my narrations, please help my channel to grow by subscribing and hitting the notification bell. I've started a new project for this channel. After releasing storytelling videos, I'm creating an after-discussion podcast about the subject matters with the help of my friend Jim in the UK. My most recent video features us talking about the Hat Man. If this is something you'd be interested in hearing, keep a lookout for my next video in which we discuss Bigfoot stories and Bigfoot in general. Thanks again for listening.